Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see a healthy crowd tonight, although I'm not at all surprised. Our speaker is well known to all of us, Jeff Smith. Just out of curiosity, how many people in the room have worked with Jeff Smith at some point? Don't worry, the rest of you will get to you. Jeff is a wonderful friend to RIT and to the Industrial Design Program. And I'm going to introduce him properly in a moment. First of all, welcome to the Vignelli Design Conversation March Lecture, which is sponsored by the Vignelli Center for Design Studies and underwritten by Bailey Brand Consulting. Normally Roger says those words. He wrote them to me to say, and he said after you finish with that, you can introduce yourself. So that's what I'm doing now. I'd like to tell you a little bit about a relationship that we have fostered over the years with the Corning Museum of Glass. And I'm going to announce our annual award recipient for the fellowship we do with them. And then we'll get to the exciting part, which is Jeff. Glass Lab is a fantastic extension of the activities of the Corning Museum of Glass, which empowers architects and designers to work with the medium of hot glass. And a number of years ago, I had the opportunity to partner with the Corning Museum of Glass, and in doing so, developed a relationship which led to our fellowship. I'll tell you a little bit about that. The Glass Lab Design Fellowship provides one graduating RIT Industrial Design graduate student with an opportunity to explore glass as a medium for rapid prototyping of ideas and participate in a 2-day Glass Lab session at the Corning Museum of Glass at the end of May each year. Each year we select a student, as I said, a graduating second-year grad who has the following assets: exceptional design skills, excellent communication skills across mediums, verbal, drawing, etc., a high degree of maturity, a very strong track record of meaningful contributions to the Industrial Design Program at RIT. This is where they go. For those of you who haven't been down to Corning, I highly recommend a visit. The Corning Museum and its new addition, which is pictured here, spectacularly beautiful minimal glass box, surprise, surprise, is a remarkable asset that we are fortunate to have here in Western New York, really in our backyard. The largest repository of glass information in the world, in the Reebok Library, and a remarkable look at the history of the material and the technology and artifacts that are behind that medium. So a little bit of history of our relationship with Corning. I ran a course back in 2012 called the Meta Project, which is a Vignelli umbrella activity. And in that second iteration of the course, Corning Museum was the sponsor. We partnered with students from industrial design and students from the School for American Crafts here at RIT. We had glass artists and industrial designers working in interdisciplinary activity sponsored by Corning. The output was brought to Manhattan as part of Design Week, and Vignellis were involved in much of the workflow of that project, which was exciting for the students and the rest of us as well. Shortly after executing that project with the Glass Lab Corning folks, they invited me down to participate in one of these events, and so I learned for myself how exciting it could be to test the boundaries of the material and to work with the remarkable gaffers, glass technicians, to prototype ideas. These are a few of the experiments that we did during my 2 days down there. So Coming back from that session with Glass Lab, we talked about how to involve students in the experience more deeply and proposed the idea of a kind of fellowship. So the winners of the Glass Lab, or the Meta Project experiment, went down and basically did a Glass Lab for 2 days. So this is, these are 2 students that were, one's an industrial designer, one's a graphic designer, or sorry, a glass artist. The 2 of them worked together to prototype ideas in a 2-day session. After that, we decided to kind of formalize and institutionalize the relationship by offering a fellowship with our outgoing grad students. So one other activity that kind of came out of this collaboration was running a Glass Lab with 13 industrial design students at the graduate level. Their output was actually in display cases, and in back there they got a chance to have a look after the lecture. So this year, we, the faculty who taught the second year industrial design graduate students, got together and made a selection, as we've done in past years. Past recipients in 2013 were David Strauss, who went down and spent 2 days working on a cookie jar, which he prototyped. In 2014, Bridget Sheehan was the award recipient, and she worked on a vessel, glass vessel, drinking vessel. And in 2015, 2 years ago, Tim Copeland went down and also worked on a drinking vessel. Beautiful piece. And last year, Matt Harani went down and did actually something they had never done before, which was to work with the lamp making studio, which is essentially working with a torch. And made a series of jewelry projects that connected into her current research, which she's doing now. Beautiful pieces. So this year, it's always a very difficult choice for us to make, but we're excited to give the 2017 award to not but Michael Kelly.
He's at a wedding.
Really?
Yeah.
He's gone.
He's in the airport right now.
Getting like voicemail. No, it's music. Mike, it's Josh Owen.
Put him on speaker on the
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Take off here.
Oh yeah, you're waiting to get on the plane?
I'm on board.
You're on board. Well, I got a bit of good news for you. I'm holding the phone up to a microphone, and there's a full audience at the Vignelli Center. You've just been awarded the fellowship for going to Corning Glass Lab for this summer.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
Those are your adoring fans, Michael.
I adore all of you far more.
All right, I'm going to let your plane take off now, but congratulations again. We can talk about the details when we get home. Congrats.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
Have a safe flight. Okay. Well, that worked. All right. Okay. Now on to the important part of the show. Of course, I want to give my thanks to our friends at the Corning Museum of Glass for making this possible. All right. So, Jeff Smith, otherwise known as the hardest working designer in showbiz. James Brown is always called the hardest working. So he's like the James Brown of the design world. Jeff Smith, IDSA, is an industrial designer currently working for Autodesk With a diverse background in product design and development, Smith brings this experience to a team that supports Fusion 360 and higher ed within the U.S. Prior to joining Autodesk, Smith worked for more than 20 years as a design director of Reflex Design, a Fort Lauderdale, Florida-based consulting group serving a range of domestic and international clients. The diversity of products included fitness equipment, medical, industrial, consumer, and kitchen products. Jeff also spent 8 years as an adjunct faculty at the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale. While there, Jeff taught SolidWorks, sketching, product design, personal watercraft design, and design for manufacturing. While at the AIFL, Jeff spent also built an internship program with Reflex Design at the school. In addition to work experience, Jeff also served as chapter chair for the IDSA's Florida chapter. He earned a bachelor's degree from the Rochester Institute of Technology and Industrial Design, in addition to an associate's in illustration.
Where else? Where else would you go?
What else would produce
Yes.
the hardest working designer in the business? Anyway, Jeff is a good friend to the program and to many of you here. We're delighted to have him. Thank you so much for coming.
Nice job. All right, let me switch here and make sure I switch this over. All right, we're going here. We got to go to the beginning. There we go. Okay, we'll present, and technology will work with us, right? Thanks for having me, Josh. Thanks for the Vignelli Center for creating this opportunity. It's totally awesome to come speak here. And I know Josh mentioned my job at Autodesk. RIT is one of the schools I support, but it's like a secret two-sided coin for me. It's like, that's my job, but it's like, okay, well, how can I help even more because I'm part of this group, you know? It's almost, I feel bad sometimes because I'm like, I put that school a little bit more ahead than the rest. What I want to talk about here is me and my experiences a little bit, showing you some failures, showing you some successes. And I have to ask you a question first, ask you to do something for me, okay? Whenever I do presentations like this, I forget to take a picture of the audience. I need to take a picture of you guys. So when I'm done, please remind me, okay? And I'd like a really energetic, yeah, this is an awesome picture, okay? But if you don't remind me, I'll forget, okay? So that's your task. Okay, so as Josh said, my name's Jeff Smith, and if you read the publications for this event, I want to talk about connections, I want to talk about design, and I want to talk about life and how those all come together. And I usually start off this talk with connections and what connections mean to you and how you can build that and use that in your design career. And the first and most important point to think about is network, right? And your network is critical to your life. And you've probably had many other people tell you this. But I went through an experience at a bad time in my professional life that I learned how important network was. And I thought I was neglecting it, but it was actually doing well. And one of the most important things about network, and why I highlight it in red there, is work. Right? And it's a combination of those two. How do I build a network, and how do I do work? If you've worked with me before or seen some of the stuff, I'm a lead by example kind of guy. If I'm going to say to you, try and do something, I'm going to say I do that, and I'm going to show you I do that. Okay? That's my theory in life and why work is so important. But when you think about networks, and this is the only school that this presentation really rings true, because how many of you know Bob Heichman? Maybe a couple of you, okay? So this is where I start my network, right? Bob's my first point in my network. Bob was my foundations drawing teacher. I had 6 hours of figure drawing with Bob every Friday. Bob was a hard critiquer, an honest critiquer, but taught me a lot about drawing, okay? And steered me in the right direction for where I was gonna go. Bob wanted me to do medical illustration. He said my style would have worked really well for that, so I went and toured the medical illustration department. I said, wow, this is cool, this is very interesting. I can see what you're saying, Bob, I get it. I learned that I would share a cadaver with a U of R medical student. I thought that was fascinating and bizarre at the same time. And I almost did it. except for John Payne. And probably none of you know John Payne. He was in my industrial design class. He was in my freshman drawing class. But if I wouldn't have met John, I would not have gone on a tour of the industrial design department. I would have walked right past it because Bob's class was on the 4th floor right next to it where interior is now. Okay? So I went down to the 3rd floor. I went over to medical illustration for my tour. But because I met John, I met Toby. And Toby gave a presentation on industrial design. He didn't show his work. He didn't show any student work. He did a 20-minute presentation on industrial design. And he gave that presentation, the passion, the enthusiasm, the projection, and framing the context of what industrial design was. In 20 minutes, sold, I'm with you, let's go. That is the way to go. And I owe Toby a lot because of that meeting. And obviously, I worked with him for a couple of years as well in the department, but if I wouldn't have gone to that tour, I would not have ended up in industrial design. So in 20 minutes, he changed the path of my life. And you understand how one person's network to the next person to the next person. And that brought me here, and I am a big fan of showing progression and showing work. So I'm not afraid, even though it's a little embarrassing, to show you people and show you where it is. Your peer group right now is your first network ring. Right now, they're your competition technically, but in 5 years, they're your peers, they're your network. You guys probably don't know Paul, Craig, or John Eads. They're all alumni. Paul's the design director at Crown. John Eads was the design director at Reef. If you buy Reef sandals with all those cool things in there, with all the key storage areas and bottle opener stuff, that was him. He's RIT alumni. And Craig Hoffman, he was at Keck for a long time, and he's now here in Rochester, and I don't even know the name of the company, but you don't know where these people are going to end up, right? So literally, the people around you right now are your first line, and the frontline people you're working with because you don't know where they're going to be. It's hard to imagine it now. John never completed a single project in college. Heck, Paul McGee never completed a single project in college, and now he's the design director at Crown. But don't tell him I said that, okay? All right? Because he's a good guy. All right? So I will show you what I did. This is some of my work when I was here at RIT. We did a gun lock chair project. These are sketches. They're sort of so-so, but there's line weight control, and there's things going on there. They're really light. They're bad backgrounds. And then there's really washy marker renderings with no shadow. Doesn't look terrible with no shadow. I should put a shadow on there. Life would be so much better, okay? But then every once in a while, there's a little gem that shows up, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, I still like that, right? The line work's not bad, it shows through it nice, and I used this sort of nice background, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, I still like that, you know? Then there's more renderings that are so light that the style I was using them was so bad, and again, there's no drop shadows. What was I thinking? How bad could those be? How much better could they be with drop shadows, right? So more big chairs and more different chairs and variations. And then in our project, we had to do a full-scale drafting, okay? Hand-done drafting on vellum. This was 92. And you had to actually draw it horizontally, rotated 90 degrees. It was awful, okay? But we had to do an appearance model made out of wood and foam. So we also learned about photography. Toby was big on photography, so we had to shoot our own slide, tungsten bulb, lighting setup. So I learned a lot about lighting. And what that lighting taught me about studio and photography applies in CAD now. All that knowledge comes right across. So you don't know what something's going to give you. I throw this drawing in here because I want to ask you, what's the most important part on that page? The car, right? Was that the project? Nope. I had this fantasy that I was going to be a car designer, and I thought, oh, I can do this. It was actually a glucose product. But the car is what matters to you right now, right? Because that's the only thing visually that's drawing your eye. Okay, so there's another car on that one. But it's exploring it. It's understanding what's going on. Some more bad renderings, but there's an ambulance. And some renderings based with a really old school chalk background with lighter fluid to blend it. It's probably really not healthy. And then cut out and put together. But again, now it's a full image here, and what's more important, the item or the fast ambulance in the background? right? So what did I do this drawing? Did I do the drawing to do the fast ambulance, or did I do the drawing to show the design of this glucose product? It's probably the ambulance, right? Okay, some construction, some theory on this thing might work, and then I come back to another little gem, right? So this image here kind of solidifies for me what RIT does and still does, is that we produce people that build real things. And it's not just blue sky, and as important as blue sky is, you also have to know how to pull it down to make something, okay? Now, I still cringe a little bit looking at that drawing from my perspective now, saying, wow, look at that nice undercut I designed in that, because I didn't know it. But at least I was starting to understand componentry and how things went together. And that's the key element to take away from that. So I'll show you my lovely wood model, weighed probably 20 pounds, all made from wood. And I'll show you drawings for other projects and renderings. These are later on. And nice renderings for this ski boot idea, and documentation of models in neon colors that are back in style now. So you can almost say it's, could be now, but it was then. And I'll show you a failure. This is a terrible project. We had an elective project to do a door opening. It was even sponsored by Ford. Okay, they donated us a carcass of a Taurus, right? And we got to have it in the basement and take it apart and do these things, but none of us took advantage of this project. This is a complete failure, okay? Total failure. I did these nice drawings of these cars with these people, talked about mechanism, and then the model we put together was so bad, okay? That's a foam core model in the chassis hull, and to pull this thing up, it was terrible. It was so bad. We dropped the ball so badly on this, okay? I show you that to say you can have failures too, even in good projects, even at good schools, right? So this product here, I'm fairly proud of this one from a school project. It was a leaf blower project. We had to do a garden piece. You could choose what you wanted to do. I did this leaf blower. I wanted to do ambidextrous, and I wanted to do this nice setup of, it could go both ways, turn the fan, adjust it, and the model was all wood. So it's a really nice model. I painted this model overnight in the basement in Colony, okay, in February. Okay? If that tells you anything, it was probably not the smartest thing, but our building at this point in time was not open at night. So 4 of us had to paint our models in the basement. We made a spray booth in the basement. Well, we made the basement into a spray booth and opened all the doors in February. It was not good. But anyway, nice product, fun. So let's come back to connections. Does any of you know Jim Gresco? He works here locally. He's RIT alum, and I think he's at Keck right now. How many of you will participate or did participate in the Student Merit Award competition this year? Next year? I would highly recommend participating. I participated. There were about 12 or 14 people my year. Jim was one of the judges. My friend Mark, he won. I took second. Jim hired me out of school. I started working before I graduated. It's an interesting experience to do that Merit Award presentation because it pulls everything together. It forces you to do it early, okay? And Jim hired me, and he hired me at Reflex Design. And you may have heard of Reflex from me or maybe a couple other people, but we're no giant firm or anything. But that point in time, Reflex was a month old. Jim was working at Voigt Sports, and he got hired out of Voigt Sports to start this company that was owned by an individual in Taiwan who also built OEM fitness equipment. He wanted to have a US-based designer team. So he hired Jim. Jim hired me. I was 2 of 2 at a company that was a month old. And so for 3 years, I worked with Jim, and I learned a lot about this process and about working with this group in Asia. And then Jim left and went to work at Kodak. The owner of the company said to me with 3 years experience, "Oh, Jeff, you want to take over?" Yeah, I got this, no problem, okay? I hired a couple people, started moving it, started working, and Reflex grew from there. So a little bit about Reflex. Reflex was owned by Greenmaster Industrial Corp. This is Greenmaster. That's Leo with the blue X5. He owns everything there. And that's their factory, and that's their R&D facility on the lower right-hand side. I spent probably 2 weeks a year at that table, not always in the metal folding chair, sometimes in a little nicer chair, but it was all about going there, being there, working on things, spending time in the factory, working on designs that you've built, that you've designed, helping them to adjust things, verify things, and actually sometimes doing design work there. So literally 2 months of my year, for almost 20 years, I would spend in Taiwan or China. And a lot of times we're working on prototypes. A lot of times we're seeing first offs, working on things, innovating ideas, welding things up, changing things. It was a great experience. It taught me a lot about different cultures, living in different cultures, and how people think in different cultures. Okay, I had some experience before that, but Asia is a different complementary set of cultures. And it's very eye-opening and interesting and teaches you a lot about life to do that. So if you have an opportunity, I say do it. This is my little, mental note for later on. At Reflex, I did a lot of international air travel. So if you're going to do over 25,000 miles a year on an airline, pick one. If you're going to do under 25,000 miles of travel, shop on price. That's sort of the break-even point. I have flown so many miles on Delta, but I don't care which airline you take. They've given me so much that you might as well earn something for your butt being in an airplane seat. Take advantage of it. I've gotten 40 free flights to Europe out of Delta for taking them, being loyal to them. So be loyal to somebody. It will pay off in the long haul. So being is that my background from RIT, learning on an analog structure, everything we did was analog. There was almost no digital. I think I touched the beta of Photoshop my last quarter of my senior year, and I think I touched the beta of Aldus Freehand my senior quarter. Everything else was analog. So my world is based on drawing and communicating that. But as I learned on the job, I had to learn CAD. As a designer, I wanted to learn Alias. I wanted to learn something like that. The main customers and Greenmaster said, we use SolidWorks now. So in '97, I had to learn SolidWorks, and I learned it all on the job. So we did a lot of hand sketching and a lot of SolidWorks modeling. For those of you that follow me on Instagram or have seen me work or do a sketch workshop, you know that I'm big on visual communication, and I'm big on combining line work, numbers, and notes. How do I communicate how my idea is or what it does as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, so I can scan it, so I don't need language as much, but find that middle ground. So you can communicate and say, oh, I like number 58, not number, the one 3 over from the left and 4 over. If I say 58, you all can see 58, okay? It's a wonderful way to work. So I do a lot of exploration that way, whether it's that's a vacuum pump, whether it's a salt and pepper shaker, whether it's fans, whether it's more fans, it doesn't matter. So let me show you some work examples from my time working as a designer. I show this because it's one of my favorite family of products. This is a high-end bike, treadmill, and recumbent bike line. The vents are actually functional. They're not just there for looks. They pull air in and cool the system and then expel air on the backside. We got to design every piece of this from scratch. And when I come here and you see that crank arm there, and the crank arm for this product is the only crank arm I designed in 20 years of working in the fitness industry. And I note that to say how rare it is. And sometimes in the real world, you have to deal with off-the-shelf components. It's so much cheaper to buy the crank off the shelf than design your own and cast it and create the tooling. That's the only one I did. And I highlight it with that. Okay, so for about 8 to 10 years, Reflex was only this fitness equipment world. And I was going crazy by that time. And I got them to accept the direction change to say, look, you guys are our family group. We'll work with you. Let us create this group that does everyone else so my designers can bounce back and forth and not get stagnant. And I feel like this system worked because I kept several of my designers for 10 years. And I know as a group, we were all slightly underpaid, but we had such potential and such work control that it was enticing to work there. So this is the first product I did where I built all the CAD file, every single piece for this, and then had tooling cut from it directly. This was also the first time this company did their own custom design, and the first time they went to China to build it. So there was just a touch amount of pressure doing that product. It's a SOLIDWORKS file. I believe it was 950 features or something like that. Everything, all the ribs, all the bosses, all the closer structures, all the templates to guide the buttons, everything. And those are a combination of a rendering and I think one photo. So I show this one as a precautionary tale. This is a speed jump rope for Reebok. That was one of the customers we worked with, and they're a licensee. They came to us and they said, we want you to redesign this speed rope. Okay, great, you're Reebok, right? All right, terrific, awesome. We start researching, do a little work on it, we reduce cost. Both parts, the top and the bottom in gray, are the same part. You cast one, you mold one of them, you flip it over, it's the bottom. There's no screws in there. The cap rotates on and locks everything in position. Simple, easy assembly, saving them money. Awesome, works great. Never saw the light of day. Could have saved them money, cut the cost in half. What didn't Reebok tell me? And what didn't I research? That the one they told me to redesign, they were licensing from somebody else with a patent on it. So don't trust anybody, even if it's a big name brand. Now, does it matter to me ultimately? No, I still got paid, I did my job, but inside you're like, wait a second. Either I messed up and didn't research it, or B, they didn't tell me. So don't trust anybody. Even if it's a big company, ask the right questions, do the extra mile. Had all these cool features on it where you could move your grip and adjust it, and it was comfortable, it was all fun. So this is something that you guys do. You do quick sketches and you splash color on it in Photoshop or Sketchbook. We did a lot of stuff like that. These happens to be for Swiss gear bikes. And I did a lot of fitness equipment. This is kind of an innovative elliptical product. Do you guys, anybody work out? Who uses an elliptical machine? Okay, I'll give you a little sad news. Everyone uses the elliptical machine because they think it's better on their knees. It's actually worse. Because we did a lot of ergonomic studies and testing with different biomechanical programs, and the elliptical machine actually has a kick in it, and it's faster than your body can move. So over time, it's actually worse on your knee. You're better off walking than using an elliptical machine. Okay? Some of the free motion ones, or the ones that have free movement, those are great. But anything that's like got that true circle in the back, it's actually not as good for your knee. So walk on the treadmill, it's better. Okay? So this is a product to try and change that motion, to adapt to that. Giant product, came in 2 cases, shipped online, was reasonably successful and innovative in that realm. But it was just too big, so we redesigned it, smaller one, better price point, had same feature and movement. You could adjust the path, you could adjust the tension with an infrared thumb remote and the elevation on the other, so you didn't actually have to take your hands off the handles. And I'll give you a little bit of insight into our world, right? This is how we would do a presentation when I was at Reflex. We'd put the presentation together, we'd do concepts, we'd include people for scale, notes, details. This was for a redesign of this product, a couple variations on price point, and then you put it through. I took some of the details out because I didn't want too many slides here. And then we obviously built a CAD model. This is a SOLIDWORKS model. This is a combination of working with teams in Asia, teams here, coming over there, sharing files, sending files back and forth, FTPing them. It's terrible. But anyway, you get things done. I'm a believer in leveraging CAD and drawing as partners in a symbiotic relationship. So a lot of times you're in a location. This one here I did actually in Taiwan. We had a file structure moving. I needed to quickly adjust where we're going to go, send everything out to everyone, get their feedback, and you can quickly move forward. And it's all proportionate, and it's together. It's a sketchbook rendering based on a CAD file. Prototype setup, developing prototypes, renderings of the product. And then this was actually for Yowza Fitness in the United States. Do not hold me accountable for the name Yowza Fitness. I raised my hand and said, that's terrible. All I can think of is Yowza, Yowza, Yowza. And I'm like, no. And they're like, this is great, this is great. I'm like, oh. Anyway, you don't win them all. But this product I take such pride in because the president of Yowza at that time told us this would be their least selling unit because it was $2,800 retail. People couldn't see it in person. It was online only. He told us the 999 treadmill would be the best seller. The innovation, the styling, the features, the function of this one, it became their #1 seller. And he came to us and said, when can you make us more expensive versions of that? Like, what just happened there? And the 999 treadmill was the least seller. So innovation leads to sales. I show this product, not because it's the most beautiful product in the world, but it was one of my goals designing fitness equipment. Fitness equipment is about as challenging as you can get. Cost, space that fits inside a container, materials, plastic, steel, it's so worn down that when you combine the aesthetics of the frame and the frame becomes a functional design member, I felt like that's a win. And this here, everything hangs off of that frame that comes up and across the top. And it was a hard sell to do it. And that became a really good seller because of that, because it changed the paradigm of what this product could look like from a perception. And perception sometimes equals new. And that went on to different variations based on it. Okay, I show you this one because it's one of my favorite pieces I ever designed that was an utter flop. I love it. It's beautiful, nice piece, folds up nice, comes 98% assembled in the box. You got to put 2 screws in, call it a day, you're done. Super happy. I love things that come that way. This is the prototype. It should play, there we go. Folds up nice.
Right?
You pull it down, it unfolds.
Very nice.
So, very happy, beautiful product. It opens for you when you put it down, you folds up nice. But why was it a failure? Everyone loved it. Everyone at the show in Munich, it was a hit. This thing is awesome. You demo it and people would just be like, oh, you guys watch it, you saw it open and close, you're like, this is beautiful. Why can't I have one of these? All the mechanisms, all the double shocks, all the plastic parts to cover up that, took the price point and went, pop, 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 pop. And when people realize it, like, oh, I can't sell that. Like, so features don't always win, okay? You have to have an eye towards what the market will bear. And the market would not bear the cost, even though there's other products like the elliptical machine, they'd ask us, when can you make more expensive ones? This wouldn't hit it as a treadmill. Did all kinds of work with Reebok and designing products to link to their shoes at that time for textures, colors, material finishes. I believe these are all renderings here. There might be a couple product shots of these. Families ellipticals. This treadmill that folds down sells really well because the price point hits right. Same product in production, more products in production. This is also one of my favorite pieces that I worked on, and it's for a simple detail. If you notice where the upright goes down and there's that white piece below it, it arcs beautifully and creates this negative space on there, and I fought forever to get that. And when you see it in person and it elevates and opens and closes, it's got this nice, beautiful negative space, and it almost feels like the Opera House in Sydney a little bit, where it arcs a little bit. So I was very happy with it, and it sold for a long time, so nice to have that. More of those products for fitness. These are Reebok. You can see the colors and textures, gloss versus matte, and then the honeycomb pattern. Upper end bike, upper end elliptical, gloss black version of it. And I want to show you this presentation here, kind of like I showed the other one, but this is more of a cautionary tale again. So this is a product for a presentation for a Reebok lower end bike. And this was kind of like at that level where we're sending it out for final approval, and we wanted to make sure all the salespeople and all the manufacturing people are on the same page. So what would we call this? Mood board. Okay, mood board, right? Do you do the mood board at the beginning or the end? Are you sure? No problem. Do it at the beginning, no problem. But every once in a while, do it at the end. Okay? 90% of the time, do it at the beginning. Sometimes, and this is why I tell you that, when we'd work on projects at Reflex, I would send off 1 or 2 designers, and they'd do a mood board, and then they work on designs. And usually what I'd do, I wouldn't look at anything. And I'd just do what I thought, right? And so sometimes, my designs would be picked. And then at the end, we'd say, well, let's do a mood board to match those designs, okay? Let's justify where we went, even though that's not where I went. Because sometimes it's very refreshing to send someone off blind, because you don't know what they're going to come up with. They're not going to be tainted by anything. And if you go off blind, you might find a nice gem. Not always, but sometimes. So both sides are valuable, okay? So you can see here, these are products. These are textures, materials, gives you good context on where the design is going. And when you see the design, you're like, oh, okay, I can see why you picked those pictures to support this design, not the other way around, okay? So this is the line here, this bike and this elliptical. So I'm a believer in wood trying to be integrated into fitness equipment. Here's a spoiler alert. I never got it to happen, but this is furniture, technically. It goes in your house. It goes in this world that's your life. Why shouldn't it look like furniture? Why shouldn't it have materials, values, and textures that match? So this nice white product with wood should match anything, right? And it should be able to go in this house. And maybe it's also environmental, so when you turn the lights off, it glowed a little bit at night and became its own little night light in your world. How many of you guys use this trick in PowerPoint? If you don't, you should. Slide 1, tell it to transition. Slide 2, it looks like you turned the lights off. And I didn't do any extra work. It's a wonderful little tool. Nice little elevation, shows scale, shows this thing. Its sister, that's the elliptical machine, ooh, it glows too, how nice. Its elevation, its setup. Thank you, everyone loved it. Awesome, we gotta make this, we gotta make this. I raised my hand. I said, guys, I love this design. I'm showing the wood for this reason. I'm worried you're not going to be able to fit the price point. Oh, no, we got this, we got this. I raise my hand again. Are you sure? I have a problem here. I don't think this is going to work because of that price point, but I love this design intent. Fast forward to the CAD file. Here we are. What's missing? The wood's missing, right? But what's still there? There's this nice, elegant air gap between where the wood would have been, where it still has that effect of that shadow. And sometimes you've got to pick your battles, right? The wood went away, but I got them to cut the steel for the legs in a completely different manner. I got them to turn them on angle, weld them, and slice them on this odd angle so it intersected the ground differently, which gave it a completely different look. Had we never gone down this route, even though I didn't get this nice flying buttress wood look, I got a new technique out of them, and I pushed them, and I pushed their boundaries. So we have this nice, elegant piece. It still has some of the core elements of the design, although not all of them. But I was super happy with the console and how the console still appeared to morph into the back structure, and that they're going to powder coat the front upright tube in a different color. It's going to look like it blends together. We did a secondary version, with the white and black version. I go to the trade show. Wow, that's pink. What happened? We agreed on blue. This is what our research told us. We want to go blue. Oh, someone liked pink. What just happened? And also, what happened to the console? You guys just bent the tube and you put it on there. Oh, wow, that's not where we were going before, and a light year from where we were at the beginning of the concept. I show you that as a cautionary tale. Things change. Be ready for change. If I can tell you nothing else, there are so many people involved in our world that change happens. How do you learn from it? How do you avoid it? And how do you design so it happens less and it's in your control? Things happen you can't control, but how do you set it up to pull it together? This is a nice treadmill that I'm so proud of. It folds up nice, doesn't do it automatically, but you've got this nice action of pulling the handle out. It rotates up and locks in position. You get a nice kinetic feel out of it. Sold really well. Still disappointed the other one didn't make it, but a nice piece all around. And you can see influences from that one as well. More products. In the fitness world, it's hard to get good photos. So anytime you have good photos, you take them, you're like, oh great, awesome. I have no idea who this Diodora guy is, but that's who the product was. Good products in life and in this world. Again, more products for Reebok, putting these together, different console to go on different product, kind of extending the life of a product by refreshing the console. More folding treadmills, more elliptical machines, more folding pieces, all prototype shows. Great, terrific, you've seen enough fitness equipment. So, one of the companies I worked with was HDI. They're now Nippon Electronics, I believe. They changed their name. But I did these glucose meters. They're OEM branded, and you can probably see them in CVS still and Walgreens. They still sell them. But they make their strips in the United States, and they make their testers in Taiwan. So it's an interesting mix of the two cultures making things. More products, more innovation. The medical world is very, very conservative. It's pretty obvious to see that, but it's a good experience to work with it. And the life cycle that these products go through from a testing standpoint, a lot of times you'll have the same internal components, and you'll build a family of products off of those because the components are what get tested. The packaging around it is not necessarily important to the government, so it's the internal structure and what it's doing. Our second biggest customer was Jardin Consumer Solutions. They build all kinds of different products. Now they're owned by Rubbermaid, like Food Saver, Oster, Mr. Coffee, Rival, Sunbeam. All those are Jardin. And we did a lot of products with them. I showed this one because this is where I used good personal control. I did this product. I started with it. I designed it. And then the director of the program took it away from us. And I was ready to explode when she did this. I'm like, what are you doing? But I said, wait a second. Bring it down a notch. I like to react quickly to a lot of things, but I said, just calm down. Told her, when you're ready, when you need us, let us know how we can help. Sometimes you have to accept that. She went away, she worked on it, she came back to us and said, we're having all these problems, can you fix it? Then they proceeded to change the motor on us 4 times. And so we had to adjust the design 4 times. But anyway, still wonderful, still successful. I think they still sell it at Target. We also designed a lot of trays to go around it, a bigger group of family to go around it. This was a fun unit that was slightly upsell, but it was countertop based. You see all those little marks on the side where it's got these nice little details? You see the one bag holder on there? The bag holder is the only thing that made it into production. There was a whole line of accessories to stack and lock onto this thing. So you could store this, you could store that, you could store this, everything. One thing made it. Everything else. Those little side channels, that's their only purpose in life, is to lock things on there, and there's one thing that made it. And if you're in retail, sometimes you have a different color, so you can sell it another way. More storage containers, more picture storage containers. I had the opportunity to do this really interesting small mini steamer, and I think this shows some of my aesthetic and some of my beliefs. If you notice across the front, there's this edge line that goes across the control and dives down by that little red light and then wraps around the back. What is that? Is that aesthetic or is it functional? It's right there if you can see my mouse. You can't see my mouse. It's a part line. Take advantage of part lines and make them purposeful. Part lines are part of our life. They have to be there. Make it part of the design. Take that opportunity to do that. This is a product that I'm slightly proud of, that I got at least wood grain into it, even if it's a decal. I wanted real wood, but or I want something that looked better than this, but it still made it at least. If you need your alcohol chilled to, I think it's like 12 degrees or something, the the Margaritaville liquor chiller is the product for you. Dispenses a metered shot every time you pull that handle down, and you can have, your Margaritaville life structure. Sometimes you do products that fit in with other worlds and are a little kitschy. I think that's a food processor, bread maker, food processor. This is a vacuum storage unit, and I show this one because it's reality-based. They came to our team and they wanted us to do a design that would be as intuitive as possible. The product they were replacing had issues with user interface, and people didn't know what to do, and they had to read directions and this or that. So their main design parameter was I need someone to walk up to this and understand what to do without any feedback. And this handle here speaks to you. It says, touch me, right? And this product in its user testing was like 89% people got it. So they were hugely happy. You lift it up and you flip the handle up and it opens and you're like, oh, great, that's awesome. You close it, oh, great. And all the buttons are right there because when you close it predominantly with your right hand. Oh, look, the start button's right there, boom. So everything worked out really nice. And it's also got this nice detail because it's got a bag storage, and that little cutout on the top, I fought for that. And I remember that the team there, why do we want that little hole there? Let's get rid of it. It looks terrible. I'm like, no. People want to touch that. And so everyone, when they first came up with the prototypes, like, ooh, what's that? And they stick their finger in it. That's the first thing you do. They stick their finger in it. And it's so rewarding to see people do it and say, see? As you stick your finger in there, you flip the door open, and the door goes chook, and your bag storage is there, and you're like, how nice, a little surprise. So how do you bring those things into it, where it's intuitive and you get a nice little surprise out of the action, right? And it's such as simple as just slicing out the design intent. Everything else is the same, okay? But the key with this product is you get multiple SKUs. The tooling for 2/3 of this product goes across 3 or 4 different products, and all of a sudden you have a lower little brother version that sells at a lower price point, and all you got to do is tool up a new cap for the top. So that's life. How do I create multiple SKUs to build things? Okay? So I show you this because I say I only designed 1/3 of that product. That product, Jardin came to us and said, we just want to refresh the front of this old product. Okay, how can I help? So we redid the front of it. They could sell it now to another chain. That was very successful. And they said, oh, can you do the front of another one? So we did another one. So one was for Sam's, one was for Costco. The interior of the product, 2/3 of the plastic, all the same. So when you shop for something, don't be afraid to look for that. If you go buy a DeWalt drill at Lowe's and a DeWalt drill at Home Depot, more than likely it's the same product. Has a different number over there, a different number over there, so they can say that consumer got an exclusive product. Keep that in mind. That's reality. That's the world. So when you shop for something, keep that in mind. When you design for something, keep that in mind. I show this product because an engineering manager at Jardin and I did this together, and we're the only two. It's not that exciting. It's not that beautiful. It's nice, clean, it's simple. But the product that's replaced had something like a 86% return rate. It was terrible. It was failing. It was over budget. Okay? It's a low entry-level product. And we determined that most of the issues came from assembly. So we started with the interior components of this and experimented with different ways to position them to A, limit the amount of hosing, limit the amount of wiring, and orientate it so it can be as easy as possible to assemble, assembled it upside down, designed it that way, and then styled the outside based on it. We cut like $1.67 out of their manufacturing costs, and their returns went down to 8%. So that's a huge success in my world. Not the most beautiful project. I'm not going to win any design awards here, but the process and how you built the product wins. So you guys might have seen this. I submitted this as my example for the design Autopsy. It's not the world's most thrilling product when you just see it there. But if you explore deeply, the one upstairs, take it down, open it up, use it. When you see it and you open it, you realize there's subtleties in there in both the design and the function. We were given 2 parameters here. Optimize the wick for the humidifier and be able to put 5 gallons of water in it. Has anyone carried 5 gallons of water? 5 gallons of water gets heavy. Have you carried 5 gallons of water in a jug that you could potentially spill in your house? Not the best thing in the world. So we did a simple process where we split it into 2 and developed a system that you'd be able to take one off and not flood the floor. And so you could fill one at a time and drive forward. If you go up there and see those 2, it's actually a pretty nice system where you pull it off. Just a couple pictures of it. I did some soft goods, more humidifiers. So does anybody know what this is? It's a cat or dog drinking fountain. It's not a urinal? Okay, definitely. Okay, so it's a cat product, right? Dog product, right? It's a drinking fountain, right? This is an example of I did this nice product, did some design intent, went off to the manufacturer. Next thing you know, boom, it's our client, I should say. Next thing you know, it's in production. I'm like, what just happened? I didn't like carrot in the middle. So sometimes happy accidents come out, and if you're a dog and it looks like a urinal, are you a happy customer? Right? So yeah, sometimes things happen and it works out okay. If you're a cat, you might not care, but if you're a dog, it maybe seems more interesting. I'm a big proponent of how can I help you? Does anyone have a giant interest to design a litter box? Not really, right? It's not the world's most exciting product, right? You can't actually interview the user, right? Okay? But when they came to us and said, can you help us with this litter box? Yes, I am honored you want to work with me. Please, how can I help you? I don't care what the product is. I don't care what's going on. How can I make it better? And how can I help you? Thank you for hiring me. J-O-B. All right? Happy to do it. LitterMade had some patents on this, and we had to get around the patents. So developing that and working around the patents to develop a product here for a manual version helped us on the powered version as well. Not the world's most sexy product, but a great exploration, and happy to work with you. Done heaters, mixers, containers. This is so you can make your Margaritaville stuff and just open it and slide it through. As Josh mentioned, I worked at the Art Institute for about 8 years. Not an educational powerhouse by any means, but it taught me a ton working there. And it was a very interesting experience teaching and learning from the students. So what I want to show you here is their work. And this stuff is 2000 to 2008. So it's all old work. But when you see the images and you put it in that context, these guys were putting out good stuff. Every project that I did with them from a design project was sponsored. So every time I taught advanced product design, we had a corporate sponsor. Jardin sponsored this one. They provided us with the guts of these. This is 2005. And these are their computer models then and their process. Or if it was Home Diagnostics sponsoring us. Or, I don't know, an audio group there. So Blackhagen Design in Tampa sponsored us here. And this is 2006. This is 12, a good amount of time ago. This is the level of detail that they were putting in. The exploded drawings I made them do and exploded files and the part lines and the structure and understanding that, a lot of these projects got them jobs. Because when you could show this, they don't have a reputation like you guys have. Actually, technically, they probably have a bad reputation when you really think about it. The Art Institute name does not carry like you guys do. So they needed to show something, said, this is what I can do. And I forced them to do that. And that level of detail goes a long way in showing what you can do and how things go together and how you can communicate it. If you look at Raphael's Blender here now, that rendering's 12, 14 years old. That's not a bad rendering, even by today's standards, to put together a CAD rendering like that. We actually sponsored this one. This is a shower radio. Again, this is a product that will never need to exist again because you have a phone that does all this stuff. So why would you need a snowboarding watch that could tell you where you were, right? One of the classes I taught was design for manufacturing. And what we did is we brought in a donor product every first night. This one happened to be a gas-powered leaf blower. The first night was teardown. We would completely disassemble this product. And what I would do is I would hand out pieces to people. And I'd say, go reverse engineer that. Next week, we'll put it together digitally. That's a nightmare if you've ever done that. but it taught them about the way things go together digitally in a CAD file. And then as we did different projects, every student had an internal component set to model around. So whether it was a leaf blower or whatever we did that year, people were able to design around those interior pieces and then model it. And because everyone contributed in the interior structure, you got a lot of power out of it. More details of that, more renderings of that. If you've ever taken apart a digital camera, those are very fascinating to take apart. And John here did this shaver we did one year. Those are all digital files, they're all digital renderings. It's got to be 14 years old. Okay? The detail on here got him jobs. When you push that through, it carries. More explosives to John. This is a project that I tried to kill every time I saw it, but it finally made it to the end. I'm like, wow, this is great. It turned out great. I hated the faceted look in the beginning, but ultimately it came out great. Exploded view to show it. Detail views, model views, exploded views, more leaf blowers. I did a personal watercraft too, so we did these designs. These are all SolidWorks models. All these details, these products. They did action shots. Oh, renderings, more action shots, bad Photoshop. And so at one point in time, the stars and everything aligned, and on a break between quarters, I was able to take 4 students with me to Taiwan. And I got the manufacturer to participate with me. And the students had to pay for their airfare, but the manufacturing facility paid for their food, their transportation there in Taiwan, and their hotel. And these 4 students came with me, got to experience as students making that trip, going there, working in the factory, touring different manufacturing sites, touring final assembly, and they banged out a project to redesign a rower in 10 days. So they got to experience the life of going to a foreign country, getting up in the morning, going to breakfast, working at the factory all day, having lunch at the factory, and then going out to dinner at night. Because that's all you do when you're working. You don't get to go do fun stuff. That's what you do. So they got to experience that. They got to experience the difference in variety of food at night and what you do, and go through it now. Do any of you use Alienware products? Does anybody use Alienware? Josh there with the funny grin. Josh designs all the Alienware products. So if you have an Alienware product, it's Josh. So you get that. I can connect you if you want. So they got to experience that. They got to come back. And all 4 of these students, what we did is each one of them then became project leaders the next quarter and directed a team and gave presentations on what they saw. So if you saw final manufacturing, you gave a presentation on final manufacturing. If you saw injection molding, you gave a presentation on injection molding. So it was a win-win for everybody that was involved. Okay, back to connections. None of you know Ray. Ray was one of my students at the Art Institute. He came in one day 10, 12 years ago and said, wow, Jeff, I just got this cool drawing tablet, and I want to draw on it digitally. I said, you're crazy, Ray, no way. I don't need to draw digitally, I'll draw on paper, right? And he finally got me to do it, and if I wouldn't have known Ray, I would not have started drawing digitally. I wouldn't have started posting on Coraflot, and I wouldn't have started to do things in a digital manner and explore Sketchbook, and then get noticed by the project manager for Sketchbook and got brought into Autodesk as a beta tester for Sketchbook and got to test the product and develop the product and give my feedback on the product. As I was doing all this work, drawing and experimenting with Photoshop or with Sketchbook, it made me do new work, it made me do new things, and it made me experiment with how I drew and what I drew, and it made me do things more often. And I stop on this image because I show you that you should finish what you're doing. I did the line work for this drawing after a long day in Taiwan when I was going to go home, worked till 6 o'clock, went to the airport, in the lounge, I did this drawing, I hated it, the vents were terrible, I'm like, the line work's awful, closed the computer, took my flight to San Francisco, made myself open it in San Francisco, made myself splash some color on it, I'm like, I'm just going to finish this, it's crap, and I let it bleed all over the place, like, just get it done, okay, done, thank you. I posted it, this was the most liked image I posted on Coraflot, and I hated it. I thought it was terrible. But that tells me that I'm not always the ultimate judge of what I'm looking at. So finish your work. Even if you hate it midstream, finish it through. It made me do more things. Is it a bread box? Is it a speeder ship? Sometimes I draw shoes. Sometimes I draw boats. Sometimes I draw jet skis. Sometimes I try and say I'm cool on color. This was 2008, trying to tell you neon was going to come back, and I was a little early, but it did come back. Boats. I like boats. I try and draw boats for fun. I'm not a trained transportation designer, but I like to do those things, and I like to show what I'm experimenting with and what I'm doing. So robots. One of the things I did at the Art Institute was teach drawing, and I taught rapid visualization. And so during these classes, I would sit there, and the first couple times I taught it, I wouldn't do anything. I'd twiddle my thumbs. I'm like, why the hell am I not drawing, right? These guys are drawing. I'm seeing them get better. Why am I not drawing? So I started to draw, and I started to make myself do it in Sharpie, and I started to quickly put things together and make myself do these one-off drawings while they were doing a lesson for me. So that taught me a lot, and it taught me about quickly communicating, okay? And this next image here is, to me, a really important piece. To you, it's not important. To me, it is. Because this made me remember my past, okay? I drew this with my son, and he was drawing on, construction paper and just drawing whatever he wanted to draw. And I was like, I'll draw too, whatever. And I finished the drawing of this train, and I've been doing all these black line work drawings, and I'm like, whoa, do you have a white pencil? And I asked him, he's like, what? I'm like, do you have a white pencil? And he's like, I don't know. No, I don't have a white pencil. Why would I have a white pencil? So I went and found one in my house in a Crayola pack. I'm like, oh my God, this is like my old school world of Canson drawing that I'd forgotten for 18 years. I'm like, I need to come back to this. And this really made me realize that that's a powerful way to draw. And I started to go a little bit nuts with it, and I started to just add this white line detail to all my drawings, and I was enjoying that white so much, and drawing shredded tanker trucks and boats and things like that it made me remember it, and actually influenced me a lot, and I use that now so much. And that white element that I'd forgotten for so long, that even when I go back to drawing marker on paper, I get bored. Like, I want to draw on colored paper, okay? Even though I've done so much on white paper, but toned paper just has sort of a nostalgic feel to me and a relevance that I almost only draw on it now. And I love what toned paper does for your work, and it makes you do something that you can't do anywhere else. And what's that? What can't you do with toned paper? You can't do an underlay. So it's twice as hard. So I'd rather lift heavy weight and make myself better here. So I do all these drawings on toned paper. I practice different views. And then next thing you know, you're doing designs for your son, and he's your art director saying, I want these drawings. I want to make a coloring book. Okay. I've never worked so hard in my life doing this little coloring book because I had this dictator telling me what to do. So you never know what your design life is going to show you. When I got hired at Autodesk, it was a really interesting experience for me because they did not want to hire me as a designer, and that was hard to swallow. But I come back to one of the things that Toby told us when we were in school, and that's, you might get hired not to be a designer because you bring a skill set that no one else has. And you can be that representation for design, and you can drive through in other manners. I'm lucky I still get to work with design. I get to talk about design. I get to advocate for it. But I needed some outlet. And I fell into Instagram, and I started posting on Instagram. And I'm really glad I did, because I did not want to do it at that point in time. I was like, oh crap, I do not need another social media channel. I don't want to do this. But I made myself do it. And it gave me an outlet for what I was doing. It made me draw more. I saw more people's work, and I learned things. And now I have this online portfolio and group of people that see my stuff whenever I post something. And it's motivational. Yeah, it's cool. All these people see this stuff, but it motivates me to do the next one. And that's more valuable than anything. So let's go back to connections. How many of you know Maritza? Anybody? Okay. She graduated what, 4 years ago? in that ballpark? I owe my job to her. She's an alumni with what? Maybe 15, 16 years younger than me? But if I hadn't have come here and did a presentation like this 5 or 6 years ago, she wouldn't have met me, I wouldn't have met her. I was doing another presentation at IDSA South, and she was on her way to her internship at Autodesk. She stopped in, saw my sketchbook workshop, realized that I did that too. At her internship, her boss asked her, do you know anybody that can do sketchbook and can capture some images and do some work for us? She's like, yeah, I know a guy. She called me. They hired me as a consultant to do all this development stuff for Fusion, basically doing all these proprietary designs that then they could use to build tutorials. When the guy that hired me realized that I had 20 years of experience, 8 years of teaching, and 17 years of SolidWorks, he said, Jeff, you'd be great in this team. And they hired me to work on this team. So you don't know who that person is. Is it your peer now? Is it alumni ahead of you? Is it alumni behind you? Is it a person you worked with? You never know where that person is going to be. Who in this room is going to change my life? Like Maritza changed my life 5 or 6 years ago. You don't know. So I do a lot of work now with Autodesk. You know I'm out here. I give away product. I help teach things. I still do drawings. I model things in CAD. I go back and forth. I believe there's a symbiotic relationship between drawing and CAD. This is me learning Fusion. I didn't know Fusion at all when I got hired at Autodesk. These are files that I built to test out theory and understanding and figure things out. I learn by doing. And that's one of the things that I can say you need to do all the time. Learn by doing, figure things out. So let's get on to the end of my presentation here, which is all about design in life, how you live your life, and how you live design, right? More than likely, none of you know my wife, Michelle. But I have to tell you a story that she told me because I think it's important for designers. Obviously, she's with me, right? I'm a designer. She would come to me to conferences or meetings sometimes, and you'd be out with people, and the first thing she noticed about designers was, you guys dress like crap. And she's like, what are you doing? She's obviously, fashion's part of her life. She follows fashion, she follows trends. And she's like, 80% of the people I see there are wearing shoes that are 10, 12 years old. What are you doing? I'm like, what are you talking about? And she opened my eyes to this psychological advantage. And I phrase it as a psychological advantage. If I can't match colors in what I'm wearing, if I can't stay on at least a remote fashion trend, how is any marketing person going to take me seriously in a designer role? And she opened my eyes to that. Well, her degree is actually a marketing degree, so maybe that's got part of it to do with it. But it opened my eyes, and it said, wow, I really need to dress for my job. I need to dress for where I want to be and what I want to do. But here's the aspect, and here's what I did for her. I taught her about mid-century modern furniture. She knew nothing about it. And a light bulb went off in her head. She said, oh my God, that's like a little black dress that never goes out of style. We need this. And I'm like, you're crazy. How are we going to do this? How are we going to buy this stuff? Well, you start saving your money and you buy one piece at a time and you slowly buy little pieces. Her womb chair, she saved for a year to buy it. She took all of her money from Banner Republic and put it in an envelope. And then she bought her womb chair. And it's the best product there is. Now, all of a sudden, she switched and she sits in the Eames chair now. She doesn't sit in the womb chair anymore. I don't know what it is. No, my kids sit in it. I don't know anyway. But I show you this for a reason, because you have to buy real things. You have to buy design. You have to support the people doing design at other companies. Never buy a knockoff for whatever you do. Okay? If we can't live by what we're trying to do, save the money, buy one piece. We started with one wooden Eames chair. That was our first piece. Do you know how much they are now? Those little side chairs, they're in the back. Oh, wait, one more. They're in the back over there. Do you know how much those are? Now, they're like $1,300. When I bought it, $480. What does that teach you about this furniture? I could sell it more now than what I paid for it. This stuff will never get cheaper. It's actually an investment. Save up, buy good pieces. Don't be afraid to experiment. And I will ding Philippe Starck here, okay? Because these bubble chairs are awesome. They're so comfortable. They are great. They look good. They've been out in the sun in my house for 15 years. They still look great. But Philippe, I got a problem, okay? And I would tell this to him. Those don't drain for crap. They hold water and then they stain. So he made a choice for comfort over drainage. And I don't know if I like that or not. But I do get mad at him because I read an article in, I believe it was Vogue. And he talked about when he buys something, he buys 3 of it. If he finds a pair of jeans he likes, he buys 3. Sends 1 to Paris, 1 to Buenos Aires, and 1 to New York. He's like, oh, because I have a house in each one, and if I'm not feeling design inspiration in Paris, I go to New York, And I'm like, wait a second, buddy. Hold on a second. If I can design in a metal chair in Taiwan, working like a dog for 12 hours a day, you could find inspiration in Paris. So I'm like, wait a second, man. Anyway, so he does great work, but I'm just a little bit of dig there. Okay, I show you a picture of rocks because don't be afraid to do things. I laid every rock. I picked where they went. I've never done landscape design. Why not try it? We were going to redo this. I picked the layout for the cement. Why not? The person that laid the cement, there's that little S-curve in the cement. He just did it straight. So between the time that they poured the cement, I picked it up and I moved it and I adjusted the S so it came over like that, And I'm like, oh, great. Never be afraid. Play with textures there, right? And those elements. So obviously I have 2 kids, so my life changes a lot. I show you this picture because I know what drawing on the ground taught me. It sucks to draw on the ground. It sucks to be on all fours, to draw with these big, giant chalks. But doing that made me a better drawer, actually, because your perception completely changes. You're in an odd position, and you're like, whoa, this is hard. So I would recommend trying it. You probably haven't done it since you were a kid. Find design intent in anything you do. So if you're going to carve a pumpkin, do it fun. Try and do something. I can show you the sketch for this. I actually still have the sketch. I did that beforehand. And find products that you like, support the design element. I don't necessarily like Adidas shoes as much anymore, but I really like that shoe. And I really like Nixon watches, so I support them. Find things you like. Support them. Support good design. Nixon makes really good product at a high designer level that's way above their price point. So find things like that. And one of the things that I look for is inspiration. And one of those things that I'm completely inspired by is World War II era aircraft and equipment, but mostly aircraft. And if you have the opportunity to see this stuff and see how they're designed, and if you see my work, you know that I'm influenced it heavily by this stuff. And the fact that it's a combination of blunt geometry and elegant geometry, plus the fact of how they made it. There's no CAD, there's no test. They ramped up production of this stuff so fast. They took companies that were making cars that were 4,000 parts and said, here, make this 49,000 part bomber. It's just unbelievable how the world shifted to do that. And the way these products are engineered, if you happen to go into a plane like this B-17 here, you go inside it and you realize that it's literally 3 millimeters of aluminum between you and the outside. There's openings all over it. There's like 14 50 caliber guns inside this thing. And there's 4 engines outside that are so loud. It's not pressurized. It's cold. You have an unbelievable respect for the people that were in this position. And one of my favorite details is where you look at things. On the chin turret there's canvas on either side, and there's a zipper. And the zippers are attached to the gun. So when the gun tracks up and down, the zippers move. What a simple solution to stopping air from coming in as you're going along through the air. It's a beautiful thing. So you never know. You meet people like John Gordon. He taught me all about boating. He introduces you to things. You do things you wouldn't normally do. And then you learn about motors. And working on motors taught me so much. If you've never spun a wrench on a motor, start to do it. take things apart. I don't care if it's a motor. I don't care if it's a broken toaster. Take things apart. Taking things apart tells you so much. My old 2-stroke jet ski motor, it's 20 years old, but I can go over to Yamaha and I can buy a piston for it and it fits. It's unbelievable what it teaches you about tolerances. And you never know. You know how to sand something, right? So I can do fiberglass. Let's try this, right? I can paint. You never know what your design industry is going to tell you. You never know if you're going to learn how to float a boat. And what you don't know about floating a boat is all you got to do is patch the hole, pump the water out, it floats. Simple as that. Once you find the hole, you just cover it a little bit and you float it. So John taught me how to do that. I'm like, that's amazing. So I like to take pictures. And when I travel, I like to go to Paris. I lived there for 2 years as a kid. I feel like it's an old home, so I try and go a lot. I like to take pictures because it's all about composition. And how do I find good composition, and how do I find drama only with a camera? If I'm drawing something, I can do whatever I want. But composition is great to practice, and you can use it all the time. I do it as much as possible. I love taking pictures. I love looking at things. I love showing things like that. I love going places and doing things. So I'll end here with Toby and Bill, and that's what I owe. I owe what I do back to this world. And I'll talk about Bill for a second, because Bill Stump came here when I graduated, and he did a presentation on the Aeron chair that was released that year. And it was kind of mind-boggling to understand that presentation and understand that 50% of their project cost was research to develop the Aeron chair. You guys know what the Aeron chair is, right? Every other chair that, has fabric like that is a knockoff, okay? Side note, the Mira chair that Herman Miller also makes is a study based on these ergonomics. But the reason they did it, do you guys know why they made the Mira chair? Is it just a lower price point? They made the Mira chair as a blunt example about product life cycle. The Aeron chair is an awesome piece. It's a wonderful piece of product. Comfortable, changed my life when I got one. I was having back issues like in the mid-30s. This chair changed my life. But it's also made of composites, multiple materials, glues. When you want to make a life cycle of this product, you can't do it. You can't disassemble it. You can't really recycle it. You can't reuse it. Hopefully, they're so good they don't ever end up in a landfill. But the Mira chair is designed around this ergonomics to have full life cycle. The Mira chair you could take apart with a screwdriver with one person in about 15 minutes. Each piece is one resin, is one material. So the whole back piece, you throw in a shredder, now you can reuse that material. The whole seat piece, you can recycle that section. Each piece is built to be one material, not composite. So it can do a full life cycle cradle-to-grave product. That's why they did that piece. Okay, so most of you don't know Toby. Did anybody know Toby? Okay, like I said in the beginning, I owe Toby. Toby changed my life. When I was teaching at the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale, little thing came across my IDSA newsletter. It said, Toby Thompson, he just moved to Osprey, Florida. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. It's awesome. It's like 2 hours away, So I'm like, okay. He had a lot of students, right? Okay, great. So I wrote him a note. I wrote him a hand letter. I said, Toby, I'm over here. I'm in Florida. Welcome to Florida. I'm teaching at the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale part-time. I'm like, if you're ever over here, look me up or whatever. And I'm working with John Payne here. And so I sent him the letter, and 2 weeks later, I got back a handwritten letter from Toby. Oh, Jeff, this is awesome. This is great, terrific. And he sends back my resume that I did in his senior class. And John's resume that he did in his senior class. That's great, guys. If I can help, let me know. I can only hope to be that on it someday, to be able to do something like that. Because I almost fell over. I'm like, who am I? And he sends back a copy of my resume that I designed in his class 16, 17 years prior. That's powerful. Okay? So I'm teaching at the Art Institute, and that's where this picture's from. Okay? So I asked Toby, can you come over and give me 2 hours of your time? I want you to give these guys what I'm trying to give them, but I know you can, okay? Because my goal is what you're giving them, but I know what you can do. And he said, yeah, no problem, come right over. came over, gave a 2-hour presentation. These guys had never seen anything like that. Obviously, I'm teaching them. After he left, almost every student said, wow, I learned more in 2 hours there than I learned in this whole college experience. And I said, well, that's awesome. But like, wait a second, what am I doing wrong here? Okay, I'm part of this college experience. But that was my goal. That was my goal, was to inspire them and fire them up, to give them a piece of what he can give. And it was really rewarding for me to be able to facilitate that coordination and see people outside of this world, to see somebody like that at a different school that's not at this level, that's down here. And they really benefited from it, and it motivated a lot of people. So I'll try and give you what Toby would give them, or give me, or give you. So Toby would show a lot of examples of other products. He'd rarely show his own work. He'd show something else, and he'd get so excited about it, okay? Like, okay, I have that Nixon watch. It's awesome. I love the details on it. I love the elegance, you know? And there'd be certain words he'd use to power that, and the thoughtfulness and the elegance of the products, okay? So I have the Like-A-Bike product over there. It's a wonderful piece of equipment. When you have kids, if you have kids, buy a pedalless bike. They will learn how to ride a bike without falling. It is a wonderful product, intuitive, excellent product. How do you show, how to communicate what we do as designers? These are all great products. They're beautiful products. Some are 50 years old, some are 10 years old. How do I do this? How do I create products like that? And so what I want to leave you with are some key phrases that Toby would use so you can carry it on. How do you keep a childlike spirit? How do you keep a childlike sense of wonder to bring through into your design? And how do you carry a childlike passion into your work? And how do you go forward with childlike energy? Those are the key elements he would give us. How do you seize your childhood to go forward? And that's the end of what I've got to do. So thank you for taking the time. I know I talk a lot and I show too many pictures. So thank you. But what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to take a picture. Yes, I can do that. No problem. I got nothing else on my list tonight.
Any questions out here?
So you're talking about networking. How do you network without coming across as disingenuous? Because that's one thing I've always been worried about, is making it seem as though I'm not interested in this person themselves, or you viewing them as an opportunity. Well,
It's a real good question. And I would say, for you guys at your age, your first peer group is this. A, stay in contact with them. Social media makes it so much easier now, okay? In my world, it was awful, right? But stay in contact with your first peer group. You're going to meet people that you either work for or are alumni or you meet through business. That's your next group. Stay in contact with them. Doesn't mean a lot of contact. It's liking their picture on LinkedIn. It's maybe a comment. Maybe an email saying, oh, you know, cool, man, I did this or whatever. You have to communicate about things that aren't about, I want to work for you, or will you hire me? It's other things. That's how you keep that connection. It's other things. About business, you know, or hey, I know this person, maybe introducing people as well. Like, you don't know this person, maybe you should meet this person. You know, sometimes they remember you for that. That's not helping you, that's probably helping them. You know, I'll give you a direct example that happened to me 2 weeks ago. What's Mary's last name in interior? Golden. Mary Golden, okay? I met her 2 weeks ago. Never met her before. David taught a class for her. They started using Fusion. I'm like, amazing, right? But I met her, I was here today as well to work in her class. But what she doesn't know is that Dr. Melanie Duffy at Auburn in interior design is doing the exact same thing as her. They are the only two people I've seen doing it. They should talk. So I introduced the two of them. Perfectly valid way to keep your network building. Helps them more than helps me. But that's how you do it. You got to think about those things all the time.
I noticed that the Reflex logo changed.
Yes.
And were you invited to design the new logo?
Yeah, I did the second one. I helped in the first one a little bit, and with Jim, just mostly commenting and directing. But the second one we did from scratch, and we made it more 3D, more CAD-based when we did it. We carried the old one for a while, but then we redid it. Yeah, it used to be an arm. Yep, we just went to the R. Yep.
So you designed a lot of sports equipment. Did you get pretty burnt out on that?
Oh yes, 100%. Totally burnt out. Totally. Oh yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I alluded to, is that I did that sporting goods stuff, was involved in that 20-year career, but the first 8 to 10 was only that. And most designers move on, they're gone. Okay, they're bored with something, they move on. You got to remember that I was the guy in charge, right? So I had a lot of creative freedom. I didn't have somebody breathing down my neck. It was just me and the people that were working for me. So I had that to keep me going. But at about 8 or 9 years, I'm like, this sucks. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it. But I was able to go to the business people and say, look, I want to start this new direction. I want to go here, and I want to create this section of the company that does outside people. They were like, yeah, go ahead. So I was able to channel that to open this world here. And then what I would do is I would move people around. I just keep bouncing people back and forth so nobody would get bored and nobody would get burnt out. Because it's very different to work on a treadmill project that takes a year and is this complex system of everything, and then work on a glucose meter that's this big. Right? I mean, totally, your scale was off, everything was off, and your timelines were off. So it was wonderful to do that. That's what saved me. That's what kept me involved for that long. But I should have left earlier. I shouldn't. I stuck around too long. Working at Autodesk taught me that my designer abilities and my small company mindset serves me very well in big company. And I should have left earlier.
But you created a lot of great.
Oh, it's fun. It was great. It was awesome. It was a great experience. I can't go wrong. But what I know now told me I should have left earlier.
Well, we're glad you're here.
I'm trying.
When you did those projects, what was the time like in general? Like when the project was given to you to the time it went out in the market?
Okay, so for example, for the treadmills, they're a solid year, right? Some of the other products like the glucose meter, that could be like 2 months, because sometimes it was an already existing tested interior that they were just reskinning. So all over the board. And sometimes people would hire us just to explore direction and concepts, and we'd never actually finish the project. But it was only to verify a direction. So it was all over the board. Sometimes projects dead-ended, sometimes they went on, everywhere from a year down to a month. And depending on the complexity of the product, and sometimes it was a 2-year project. So, I mean, it was all over the place. And sometimes that happens. If you're talking about a car, it's 3 years. So, kind of all over the board.
So throughout that year-long process, would you be doing other projects as well?
Yes, definitely, because there'd be lulls in that, highs and lulls in that product. So if you're working on a treadmill project, it'd go along, you'd work on it, and then you'd be out of your hands for like 2 weeks, and you'd be working on something else, or you're working on that project in Taiwan, but you're also working on 3 other projects. So you'd be juggling constantly. And that's the nature of the beast of a consultant. You're not just working in the corporate world churning something, you're juggling 12 different customers as well, not just one company.
What is one particular mistake you've seen young designers make which makes them get caught in a trap, and it's almost like they harm themselves in the long run as creative individuals? What is that one mistake you've seen them make?
So you're saying how do designers get caught in a trap, or how do you get out of it?
Creative traps, like they might have certain ideologies or approach towards making things, right?
Let me make sure I understand correctly. You're talking about a creative process trap or a career trap?
If you could touch on both.
Okay. Okay. So a creative process trap. Okay. I'm a believer that concept development and creative process is like a muscle, and you get really good at it the more you use it. But I also equate it to turning on a light switch in a dark room. Younger designers stub their toe on the bed because you don't know where the light switch is. More experienced designers know that the bed's there, they walk around it, and they know the light switch is over here. Okay? So that's really what it comes down to. That as an experienced designer, I know where the light switch is. Just turn it on, and I'll crank it out. You run into the bed a lot. Okay? You will learn the more you do. Like, you guys should be looking at reference, studying everything you see, looking at cars, looking at surfaces, looking at products, taking apart products. That's how you'll get moving ahead with that. And soundboarding off your peers the most you can. Continually ask people's opinion. Talk to people and get past it. As a career direction, find the right people to take advice from and soundboard off them. If they're older, if they're younger, it doesn't matter. It's do good work, cover your ass, and keep working. That's how you do good in a career. Stay somewhere longer than a year. Don't bounce around under a year. 3 to 4 is a good number. Get what you can out of it. Obviously, if the job sucks, do a year. Do as much as you can. Make yourself indispensable. David, you got something?
What was your most interesting network experience that you've had?
Most interesting network experience. I'd have to say Maritza. And that's why I show it. Because that's the most interesting experience I've ever had. Because she's so much younger than me. And she changed my career. You never know where it's going to come from.
I'm laughing because Maritza is a force of nature. It doesn't surprise me at all.
But it's funny. It's just right place, right time. Yeah. Do you know someone that can do that? Oh, yeah, I just saw him last week. He can do this. So, if I wasn't at the IDSA conference doing that for IDSA, volunteering my time, she wouldn't have seen me do it. So it's a little bit of everything is how that works. You don't know where people are going to end up. You don't know where everybody in this room is going to end up and what they're going to do. Okay? I use Paul McGee, right? I showed Paul McGee. He's design director at Crown. The commercial team for Fusion, I was doing some work with DAAP for a project with them, maybe a year and a half ago. And they came to me and said, would you come to Crown with me? And I'm like looked around a little bit and I'm like, yeah, I'll come to Crown with you. Paul's the design director. Heck yeah, I'll go there, So I went there and showed up. They didn't know that, But I show up and the person they're trying to sell Fusion to is Paul. So you never know where these people are going to end up and what that's going to mean to you in a connection level. Anybody else?
Thank you, Jeff.
No problem.